Brainwashed, Challenging the Myth of Black Inferiority by Tom Burrell. Introduction. You've been misled, you've been had, you've been took. A quote by Malcolm X. We are strong, survivors of the Middle Passage, the whips, and the chains. We have survived centuries of terror, humiliation, vilification, and deprivation. We are smart, even when our literacy was illegal. We learned quickly, invented, discovered, built, taught, and excelled against all odds. We are creative, making a way out of no way, and constantly rebirthing and birthing American art and culture. So then why, after all this time, when calculating the achievement of the American gene, are we still ranked at the bottom of almost every good list and at the top of bad lists? Why? Despite our apparent strength, intelligence, and resourcefulness, do we continue to lag behind in language in so many aspects of American life? The answer is intricately linked to the hundreds of years blacks have lived with white guilt and black shame. It lurks just beneath the surface of the American consciousness, like a cancer that can't be healed because it can't be discussed honestly and openly. 45 years in advertising industry have given me personal and professional insight into the power of propaganda. Positive and negative, the use of words and images to influence change and even transform people's lives. The knowledge and insights I've gained have inspired me to provoke an honest discussion in the hopes that the healing process can finally begin. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. It was at the beginning of the New Deal, the second coming of black independency. Throughout my community, we Negroes were indoctrinated with the idea that we were unable to take care of ourselves and that we needed help and handouts from Mr. Charlie in the form of government programs, including public assistance, food stamps, and any other gifts the government bestowed. The unquestioned dependency gifts, the dependency, what psychologists call learned helplessness, was, I believe, one of the many reinforcements in deep seated race based inferiority. The message was clear, consistent, ambiguous, and loud. It was subtly broadcast by the white mass media and bluntly repeatedly echoed by its black recipients. A nigger ain't shit. It was, for the most part, an advertising pitch, not much from different form ones used to sell beer, laundromat, detergent, or life insurance. The two main ingredients of this campaign create a toxic blend of white supremacy and black inferiority. Sold. In 1971, I and my partner Emmett McBain launched what would become Burrell Advertising, a full-service advertising agency specializing in promoting products and services to then largely ignored African American consumer. Burrell Advertising became an industry leader because of its positive, realistic, and compelling depictions of black life and culture, particularly in the medium of television. We were neatly aware of the power of culturally relevant language and images to influence perceptions and attitude towards my clients' products and services. In other words, we created a decimated positive propaganda. Many years later, while minding my own business, literally as chairman and chief executive officer of Burrell Communications, I coined the phrase, "Black people are not dark-skinned white people." It was a conscious summation of the base of my business that Black Americans, because of our heritage and history, have a unique culture that could be best reached through strategies, words, and images subtly or overtly related to those historically and cultural factors. All aid agencies employ creativity, writing, art, photography, and music to capture the public's much of divided attention. However, the most important part of what we do study people, why they do what they do, and why they buy what they buy. Understanding what motivates people is a crucial part of my profession. But being a black man, I was compelled to understand the way blacks are viewed in this country and the way many of us unconsciously view ourselves. Connecting the black dots on a larger level early on. From slavery and Jim Crow segregation to commercial and social propaganda became my passion. Burrell Communications research of 70s and 80s showed that African Americans have a distinct psychological needs, desires, fears, hopes, and aspirations, all born of circumstances arising from our experience as chattel slaves in America. We discovered, for example, that the first dot, Black preference for a high end status brand was driven by the need to compensate for feelings of low self esteem. Second point, our penchant for a lopsided spending savings ratio grew out of our need for immediate gratification based on a chilling pessimism about uncertain future. Point three, we indexed expending disproportionate amounts in every product category related to cleanliness, from feminine douche to scented laundry detergent to car deodorizers and household disinfectants, primarily to compensate for being historically stereotyped as dirty. The genesis of all three attitudes can be traced to American slavery. It was in America, the land of the free, that Africans were chained and branded both physically and psychologically as subhuman beasts of burden. It was here that we were first indoctrinated with the idea that we were, in fact, not humans at all, but property. I determined to gain a clearer picture of the various ways that our painful history in America manifests itself in present day attitudes and behavior. Yes, there were intergenerational historical factors determining African Americans' purchasing patterns, but might not there be similar factors influencing our daily lives, our relationships, our institutions? In 2014, I sold the company and left the advertising business, but not completely. I found myself consumed by what I had learned and applied for many years of real life African American culture anthropology. How can I utilize what we knew that we've been branded physically and mentally from the beginning to enable further explorations? How had the branding been perpetuated even after our physical chains were broken with the end of legal slavery? How were our intentionally torturous enslavement and indoctrinations transformed into the powerful, pernicious, all pervasive, mass media driven brainwashing that still goes on today? As a marketing profession who respects and admires brilliantly conceived and deftly executed propaganda, and I eventually recognized that one of the greatest propaganda campaigns of all time was the master marketing of the myth of black inferiority to justify slavery when they're a democracy. Ingenious. I also became fascinated by the timeline of this perverse but brilliant campaign. The brainiac of his day, Thomas Jefferson, the propagandist, the extraordinaire, chief strategist, and creative director, along with other power wig power brokers, sold the idea of white supremacy to the masses, all the masses. They conspired to make this out barbarity America's first big brand. The early American ruling class used every available tool religion, law, politics, art, literature, even the nascent field of science as tool of their sales, promotions, and PR strategies. The goal was to rationalize and reconcile the development of the single society with two outrageously contradictory parts, one built on the concepts of human freedom, the other built on a vicious governmental sanctioned destruction of human freedom, all with the same history making quill pen. Think about it. American had grappled with the moral dilemma of slavery ever since the first Africans landed in Jamestown in 1619. The founding fathers found themselves at a serious moral crossroads. They desperately needed a way to justify gaping divide between the God-fearing, freedom-loving rhetoric and the nation's increasingly addictions to cheap labor slaves. The solution and effective marketing campaign created to not only force the institution of slavery to fit within the budding democracy, but one aimed at convincing both master and slave that blacks had always been and would forever be mentally, physically, spiritually, culturally inferior. On a personal level, I'm revolted. Yet, as a marketing man, I find it to be an audacious, ingenuous strategy. It is as though the original colonial elites hired a PR agency to sell the concept that Africans were innately inferior and it was indeed completely justifiable to treat them as subhuman beasts that last several centuries still haunt us and hinder our advancement and achievement. It has separated successful blacks from disposable blacks, those who simply refuse to act right and prosper. In our effort to prove our equality, we unconsciously chased the master's dream, adopted his values, moved into his neighborhoods, went to his schools, and danced to his tune. While in assimilation and survival mode, we had no time to consider the price we paid for leaving our communities and leaving behind so many who looked like us. In the 60s and early 70s, we paid lip service to being black and proud, But the sudden conversion was not supported by the necessary psychological machinery to make the change permanent. Even today, we have woefully inadequately countermeasures, no permanent culturally mechanisms to undo what a 400-year marketing campaign has achieved. Our insistence that we have broken from the negative propaganda is wishful thinking. It takes much more than a big afro, clenched fists, and danceable slogans to fight a centuries of unremitting exposure to twist images and dehumanizing messages. While I was writing this book, something happened that few of us in our wildest dreams ever imagined. A black man became president of the United States of America. Some may look at that and say, see, black Americans have overcome. As Dr. Martin Luther King predicted, we as a people have gone to the promised land. In this day and age, imagery is power. Never before has the country had the image of a black man occupying the highest office in the land, delivering the State of the Union address, drafting and promoting national policy, and disembarking from Air Force One with his black wife and daughters. From a marketing perspective, this is powerful, life altering stuff. Yet, anyone who looks beyond the glow of the moment will understand that neither we nor our situation will change overnight. A few of us have always succeeded, somehow, in spite of the failure of our American dream. Barack Obama, through intelligence with self determination and yes, not a small confluence of favorable circumstances, may have reached his promised land, but most black Americans are still wandering in the wilderness. The black inferiority and white superiority campaign has morphed exponentially in the new media age, a vastly different, highly technological phase of instantly communicating messages and images has changed the landscape forever. Now, a click of the mouse or a push of a button or a finger slide across the screen of a portable media device defines what an opportunity and what's a lost cause, what's stagnant and what's progress, what's valuable and what's worthless. In the so-called post-racial era, internalized black inferiority combined with this new media reality means the rules of engagement have changed dramatically. America's racial fatigue, coupled with the election of the nation's first African American presidents and the illusion of the acceptable exception, present new challenges for the best of us and, mostly important, for the rest of us. The illusion of racial progress paves the way for a nationwide survival of the fittest mentality. It will be okay to uproot urbanites so suburbanites can reclaim valuable metropolitan areas. Gentrification is still unrelenting. Efforts to diversify the workplace and neighborhoods will become needless distraction. Affirmative action or other race or class based efforts will become moot issues of no value. After all, racism and prejudice died with the 2008 election in a post racial society with new media as its weapon. The brainwashing campaign now enters a phase that threatens to totally destroy our way of being. At a time when the global company is a touchscreen away, when a fractured, disparate nation is forced to once again dig deep and tap into its innovating roots to save itself, created, time-tested black people can ill afford to sit on the sideline besieged by a dormant, invisible virus. Now more than ever, we have to come to terms with this devastating campaign. We've been programmed to deal with serious issues as a topical, epidural level instead of going into deep issues to the root cause. President Obama, utilizing the Survey New Media campaign to change hearts and minds and votes, has opened the door for counter propaganda campaigns, one that benefits not just black people but whites as well. Now, we are at a point in history when the opportunity for moving ahead has never been greater. We can seize the moment if we only take charge of our own destiny, our own reprogramming. If the pool, our resources have the critical mass, the numbers, the voting power, and the persuasive skills to enable us to combat the ills that derive from lingering racism. The same skills that allowed us to survive, if used less passively or more proactively, can enable us to thrive. I've experienced race-based lack of self-esteem firsthand. I know that it was not based solely on low income and poor education. I, as upwardly mobile, I was The sense of lack was right there, climbing every rung of the ladder success right beside me. Over time, I've learned that the root of the problem wasn't what was being done to me. It was what I've been brainwashed to feel about myself. We cannot cure the symptoms without acknowledging the disease. These pages examine the roots of why, more than 140 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, so many of us still think like slaves. I interview and incorporate the thoughts of experience of many people throughout this book. Although the changed names and ages of some these interviewers to protect their identities, their honest input was invaluable in illustrating the modern day impact of black inferiority conditioning. In Brainwashed, we will question why we still think so little of ourselves, why our grandmothers still put their savings in a special offering plate to help pay for the pastor's new luxury automobile, why our children answer when called hoe or nigger, why our one-time civil rights business and political heroes succumb to crabbing and backstabbing, and why we all too often avoid critical thinking about any of this. This book examines our subconscious perpetuation of the myth of black inferiority by asking these fundamental questions. First point, why can't we build strong families? Second, point two, why do we perpetuate black sexual stereotypes? Point three, why are black and beauty still contradictions? Point four, why do we keep killing each other? Point five, why we keep killing ourselves? Point six, why can't we stop shopping? Point seven, why do we expect so little of each other and ourselves? Point eight, why do we give up on our people so willingly? Point nine, why can't we stick and stay together? Point 10, why is the joke always on us? Even at this unprecedented and powerful point in American history, friends, colleagues, and well wishers still express their frustration with Black America's ever worsening dependencies on handouts, corporate sponsorships, and our kids' lack of respect for anything and anyone, especially themselves. They finally convinced me that my advertising-based discoveries about the brainwashing of my people and my ideas about how to finally reverse its effect could fill a book. Well, here it is.